to go ahead and get started. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Carrie Durward. I am a Nutrition Extension Specialist here at Utah State University, and I wanted to talk to you guys today about urban agriculture, community gardening, the research that's there to support nutritional benefits, and areas for future directions. We're going to be talking about a real neat project that I worked with over this past year and continue to work with, New Haven Farms out of New Haven, Connecticut, and some other examples from Extension. Please feel free, there's just a few of us here today. We've got 3 logged in so far. Please feel free to ask questions as we go if things come up. Okay. So I just wanted to start by talking a little bit about the benefits of urban gardening. Then we'll talk a little bit about that New Haven Farms as a case study for how urban gardening might be implemented to improve nutrition and other aspects of life for people. I'm going to talk a little bit about future directions where cooperative extension might have a place with urban gardening. And then end by discussing a few different extension program examples that I've found in the literature of people who are already doing things like this. So the benefits of urban gardening are definitely multifaceted. The strongest evidence probably is for the psychological benefits. We know that exposure to greenery in general, but also specifically from some food gardening work, that we're going to see a lot of psychological benefits. So people are going to have affective benefits, meaning that they'll have better mood, less tension, more positive moods, feelings of self-accomplishment, stuff like that. Gardening has also been shown to have positive effects on people who have psychological diagnoses. Food gardening specifically has actually been shown to reduce the risk of Alzheimer's disease or dementia in people as they age. Now, what we don't really know about gardening is whether or not there's something special and specific about gardening, or whether it's just an effective way to keep people both mentally and physically active, and that's what provides the psychological benefits. But in either case, it seems very clear that gardening really does provide all of these mental health benefits. So from a social perspective, gardens have been shown to increase neighborhood social networks and decrease isolation. Participants in some studies report increased feelings of safety and increased community pride. The other interesting thing about community gardening is that it's been shown, especially in lower income disadvantaged neighborhoods, to increase the amount of empowerment that participants experience, meaning that they feel empowered to take on other problems in their community outside of gardening. So it's really a community building intervention in that way. So for example, one study found that neighborhoods and communities that had implemented community gardens were more likely to organize themselves to try to address other community problems, like problems with crime. So, hi Davis. So there really are quite a few social benefits as well. From an economic perspective, home gardening, community gardening, has many positive economic benefits. It's been shown in quite a few studies to save people quite a bit of money as far as groceries go, taking costs into account. An additional economic benefit is in impoverished areas. Community garden going in will actually increase the price of property values. So one study that was done in New York City looking at hundreds of community gardens found that prices of properties next to the community garden increased and continued to increase over time. So, for example, properties that were right next to community gardens actually increased over 5% in their property values 5 years after the establishment of the community garden. And finally, intuitively, nutrition seems to be an obvious benefit of gardening. We assume, the public assumes that dietary quality and physical activity will improve when we start gardening. However, there isn't a whole lot of data to concretely test this assumption. So I want to talk about the nutritional benefits of urban garden in a little bit more detail, talk about where the research is and where I think we can collaborate and add to it. So when you talk to gardeners, their main motivation for gardening is often access to fresh food and vegetables and improved diet. So for example, we have one study that's a little dated from New Jersey, done through Rutgers Extension, and they found that the top 2 reasons why people were motivated to garden at home or in community gardens were the fresh foods and the improved diet. And this is supported by another study, community gardeners in upstate New York, who also described access to fresh foods, enjoyment of nature, and health benefits as being the top reasons why they were involved in community gardening. When you use surveys to ask people about how many fruits and vegetables they eat per day, people report increasing the amount of fruits and vegetables that they eat when they start gardening or when you compare gardeners to non-gardeners. And the results are pretty dramatic. So in this first study that I'm citing here, it's in Denver, Colorado, and over 50% of community garden participants are meeting the 5-a-day fruit and vegetable intake, while only 25% of non-gardeners are meeting this intake. Another study that was done in Flint, Michigan, looking at, so this was a phone survey, and they were just asking adults in the household to talk about whether or not anybody in their household gardened. And if someone in their household gardened, they were 3.5 times more likely to again meet that 5-a-day fruit and vegetable mark that we want people to make than in households where nobody was a gardener. Finally, a study in Toronto looking at low-income community garden members found that participants reported that they increased fruit and vegetable intake, that they were eating a healthier diet as a result of their gardening. So the important thing to realize about these studies is that we are asking people to self-report their dietary intake, and that we're not using any sort of control group. So it could be the people who choose to garden are vegetable lovers, right? Instead of gardening, actually increasing vegetable intake. So there really is a very large hole in the research here. I think it's an exciting area for more research because there's a lot of public support for it, both public support, political support. There's a lot of interest in interventions like these, and I think it's really a place where we need to add to the literature to be able to argue that more programs like this are needed. So I think definitely in program development stages, we do need to try to get money to conduct randomized control trials so that we can prove causation. And it would really be helpful for acceptance by the nutrition community if we could improve our dietary intake measures in these studies. So what about potential clients who don't want to learn how to garden or who are not able to learn how to garden? Maybe their mobility is an issue. We also actually have a stronger research base showing that vegetable provision is also an effective way to increase vegetable intake through a couple different routes. So the first study talks about CSA members, and we know that in general, CSA members consume more vegetables, especially the dark green and yellow vegetables that are typically underconsumed by Americans. And that but again here, there could be an issue of self-selection. People who sign up for the CSA do so because they want to eat vegetables, and it's not necessarily joining the CSA that's causing them to eat more vegetables. The second study that I have cited here is the Seattle Farmers Market Nutrition Program. So they evaluated the impact of delivering a basket of produce to homebound seniors, and they used a quasi-experimental study. So they are comparing seniors who signed up to receive baskets to seniors who are also homebound but outside of the program delivery area. So they do have that as a control. And they found that the market basket delivery did increase seniors' vegetable intake by 1 serving per day compared to controls. The second study done in pregnant women found that actually providing vouchers for fruit juice led to a much higher increase in fruit intake than just providing advice. So I think what this really shows us is that although education is very useful and helpful, sometimes we need to address issues of availability and access as well if we actually want to improve behavior. So the final study, I think, really does a great job of showing this and really does a great job of showing the importance of these integrated extension programs that really address multiple facets of the problem. And so this program was done looking at WIC participants. And so they randomly assigned WIC participants to receive either education on, how to use vegetables, how to prepare them, how to store them, the importance of eating vegetables. They provided them with farmers market coupons, or they provided them with both education and farmers market coupons, and then they also had a control group which didn't get any input. And they found that both the education and the farmers market coupons were effective in increasing intake, but the combination of the two was much more effective than either one alone. So again, I really think that this points to the need for us in extension to not just provide education, but to also try to address other barriers where we can. Any questions or comments so far? Okay, so I wanted to talk to you all about a wonderful organization that I worked with over this past year. So Scott tells me we're getting a little bit of feedback. Could everybody check that their mics are muted? Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Sorry about that. Okay, so New Haven Farms is an organization in New Haven, Connecticut that is dedicated to trying to improve community health and individual health through urban agriculture. And it's located in New Haven, Connecticut, which is the second largest city in Connecticut. There's about 129,000 people who live there. And it's a very interesting city because you have pretty large disparities in socioeconomic status, pretty close together. So you'll have neighborhoods right next to each other where people are very well off and have great food access, next to much more disadvantaged neighborhoods where, the only place to buy groceries is the local convenience store, and food insecurity is very common in these areas. And just like we see in the rest of the United States, these levels of lower socioeconomic status and food insecurity are correlated with higher rates of obesity and diabetes in these populations. So I want to let some of the participants actually introduce this study to you. Scott is telling me that I didn't do some. That's okay. Alrighty.
Eso de estar en contacto con la naturaleza, con la tierra, y de ver, sembrar una semilla tan chiquita y que después nos dé el alimento para la mesa.
Yo entré en el programa porque yo tenía prediabetes. Al yo estar teniendo prediabetes, a mí se me hizo una invitación de poder entrar en hacer ejercicio, en cómo poder alimentar sanamente. Y también nos dieron la invitación de ir a sembrar, a cómo sembrar, cómo cosechar los vegetales.
Era un lugar que era pura tierra, piedra, son solo unas plantas de cilantro secas ahí. Nosotros las arrancamos, limpiamos bien, echamos tierra nueva y empezamos a sembrar. Empezamos por poquito y ahora ya es más o menos, es más mucho. Sembramos el tomate, como 6 clases de lechuga que no me acuerdo los nombres, y tomates como de 4 clases diferentes, pimientos, jalapeños, de todo un poco mezclamos.
Bien, mis niños han aprendido a hacerlo, mis niños nunca sabían qué era sembrar, qué era cosechar, nunca habían sentido lo que es la tierra, tocarla, incluso ver hasta las lombrices.
Pero es tan delicioso, es tan emocionante, es tan lindo de uno mismo sembrar, uno mismo cosechar, uno mismo llevar a la casa y uno mismo cocinar.
Carrie, excuse me, should we be getting your computer feed?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're just still getting a photo of you and the audio that's in Spanish, so.
Oh no. All right.
Well, I'm getting it. It's not the only one. Debbie's getting it in Wasatch.
Is
It's
anybody
working
seeing
in
the
Box
video?
Elder.
Okay. I'm just going to finish playing the video then, and I'll summarize it for those of you who weren't able to see it.
Thanks.
Con Rebeca, que tanto nos ha enseñado, le agradezco también mucho a ella y a todo el resto de voluntarios que nos enseñan.
Porque cuando yo no entré en ese programa, no sabía de eso, yo comía cosas que realmente no eran buenas para mí. Y ahora que estoy con ellos, sé que comer saludable es lo más sano para uno, y hacer ejercicio, estar activo.
Okay, so for those of you who couldn't see the video, the participants are really talking about the wide variety of impacts that the participating in the garden has had on their life. They talk about how the emotional benefits of being able to work in the garden. They talk about what their children learn, and they talk about the real motivation to cook and eat the food that they bring home with them. So I think it's really clear from listening to what the participants say that there really are a lot of benefits to them being involved in the community garden that go beyond the dietary benefits that they might be getting from the vegetables. But the other thing that's really interesting to me in listening to their comments is that those other benefits are providing motivation to them to eat more vegetables. So the value that they have in the garden and in their experience makes those vegetables that are coming out, I think, more likely to be eaten. But we really do need the research to show that. So the New Haven Farms program actually started as a community garden at the Fairhaven Community Health Clinic. They started with one small plot, and response was so large that they expanded to several different plots around the Fairhaven community. They gardened the plots in collaboration with at-risk community members and their families. And the produce was then taken home by these community members for use by themselves, their families, for sharing with their neighbors, or however they would like to use it. They also partnered with the local chapter of Cooking Matters to provide cooking and nutrition education to the participants. And from their first year, they had for their first year in 2012, they had really incredibly good production, productivity, and participation. So throughout, they were collecting some preliminary data, and they recorded 35 different participants coming throughout the 16-week growing season. They averaged 14 different participants each week. They managed to grow a very large amount of produce on a very small amount of land. They distributed over 2,000 pounds or 15,000 servings of vegetables over the 16-week growing period. And that worked out to an average of about 9 servings of vegetables per day per participant. So that's not saying that each participant was getting 9 more servings of vegetables per day, because most of these people were members of households, which were on average about 5 people. So we can estimate that on average, people were getting approximately 1 serving per household member per day as food that they were able to take home. So then in 2013, they did a lot of fundraising. They received a grant from the Connecticut Department of Agriculture that allowed them to hire a full-time gardener. And they convinced a local printing press to allow them to lease a plot of land located on the opposite side of their parking lot. And so they made plans to really ramp up the program and to also try to ramp up the research that was being done on it, because they felt like it was really important to show the efficacy of this program in improving health and well-being, to make it sustainable, to be able to argue for future funding for it. So this is the site before they started developing it at all. It's on the river there, so you're seeing buildings beyond the river. And as you can see, you know, it's rocky, gravelly, weedy. It's basically the edge of a parking lot. So with the help of a huge number of volunteers, New Haven Farms volunteers, service learning and service organizations, the members themselves were out there doing a lot of the effort, as well as a huge effort by the farmer that they hired, Jacqueline. They were able to really transform this piece of land into a very highly productive and very nice looking and useful teaching farm. So the picture on the upper left is early on in the season. On the right is during a session early on in the season, and below is later in the season when the first tomatoes were being harvested. So one of the really important things for me, one of the things that I learned was really important through my work with this was the provision of childcare and involving the children in the program. So quite a few of the participants talked to me personally about how important that was to them and the fact that they wouldn't be able to come otherwise. I actually had one woman in tears talking to me about how much it meant to her that we had thought about her needs as a mother and made it able for her to participate in that way. So the garden program that they implemented this year had 3 parts: exposure to gardening and gardening education, which was led by the gardener, Jacqueline, and was presented in both Spanish and English. We also had vegetable provision, so each participant got to take home a bag of fruits and vegetables every week. On the left, you see the farmer Jacqueline in our cooler, which was actually a really neat thing. We did not have the funds to purchase a industrial cooler to keep all of the produce, and Jacqueline actually found plans to build our own using one of those plastic sheds that you can get at Home Depot, a jury-rigged AC unit, a window AC unit, and insulation, and was able for, I think it was less than $2,000 to build a cooling refrigerator that was able to keep the produce at food safe temperatures and really allow us to expand what we were doing. And the last part of the intervention was cooking and nutrition education. So this was delivered by Chef Bun and Chef Pablo. They were doing cooking demonstrations and tastings on site each week with the vegetables that were available. They were also presenting nutrition education, which is one of the places where I was involved. I developed a nutrition education program based on the My Plate 10 tip sheets. So we focused on increasing vegetable intake. So we talked about, different strategies for increasing vegetable and fruit intake, how to get your kids to eat more vegetables, easy ways to prepare vegetables. But we also talked about other general nutrition concepts like portion size, increasing whole grains, reducing overall fat, trying to focus on healthy fats, and other things like that. The other part of the nutrition intervention that we used was a goal-setting worksheet. So we asked participants to set goals for themselves each week, health-related goals. And we didn't say that it had to be nutrition-related, but that was some of the options that were provided. And then the people who were leading the sessions each week would review those goals and progress that people had made, and they would work as a group to troubleshoot people's progress or celebrate their achievements. So goal setting in that way is a very strongly research-based way to cause behavior change, and so that's why I felt like it was important to make that a part of it. So unfortunately, I don't have a picture of her here, but we also had a dietetics student, Maggie Walsh, who was also providing the nutrition education to the participants. And so the research coordinator, Monique, put together a pretty rigorous evaluation of the program. So at the beginning and the end, we're collecting information on diet using an NHANES survey tool. We are also collecting information on food security using a survey tool from the USDA. We're measuring height and weight so that we can collect BMI and measuring blood pressure. So this is at the beginning and the end of the 16 weeks. We're also completing a questionnaire with the participants each week to ask them about the food use. Were you able to use the produce? How did you use it? How much of it did you use? Did you give some of it away? To collect qualitative data like that. And unfortunately, they just finished collecting the data, so I can't share any of the results with you, but I'm very excited to see what they found. And I feel like this is definitely an example of how, of the type of program that Extension might be able to collaborate with communities to provide and fill a need. So in Extension, we really do have all of the expertise needed to put on a program like this. So we understand the food system, all the way from farm to table. And we also have expertise within Extension in things like community building. Our Extension professionals out in the communities are already situated as leaders in those communities. They're also community members, so they understand the community, and they're seen as subject experts. So I do feel like Extension is really perfectly situated to address some of these complex issues of our times that traditional research paradigms have not been able to so far successfully address. So that's very exciting for me, and I hope it's exciting for you guys too. So I wanted to end by talking about 2 examples of integrated programs like this that are currently out there being done. The first one is a project put together by, it's funded by the CYFC, the Center for Youth and Family at Risk, and it's done in North Carolina. And so the purpose of their project was to empower communities to produce food for families through community gardening. They also wanted to deliver hands-on nutrition education. They wanted to create opportunities for youth to create agribusiness skills. They wanted to build leadership potential and abilities in community members. And they wanted to provide activities for family members of all ages to work together towards a common purpose. And to do so, they really had to collaborate in all areas of extension. So they had horticulture agents, they had 4-H agents, family and consumer science agents, agriculture agents, and community development agents, all working together to plan this program. And the other point that they talk about that I think is really important is the importance of promoting community partnerships. So they talk about the importance of this in providing a sustainable program. So after the CYFAR money runs out, they want the community gardens to continue and to continue to have a positive impact on the community. So they have obviously been partnering with a lot of different community groups, Master Garden volunteers, university staff and students, elementary and high schools, town governments, local farmers, local gardening clubs, retail stores, as well as community resource centers. And to evaluate their program in 2012, they did use a retrospective survey, and they did find that the majority of participants, the vast majority of participants, did report eating more fruits and vegetables. They did report that they learned new and healthier ways to prepare garden produce. They learned about why fruits and vegetables are good for them, and they learned the lifelong skill of how to grow food for their families. And they also felt more involved in the community. The second program is a little bit of a different approach. I think it's a very interesting model. It's called Harvest for Health. And this program matched cancer survivors, both adults and child cancer survivors, with master gardening mentors for a year-long program where they worked to plan, plant, maintain, and harvest gardens in their own home. So the participants were provided with either the materials to build a raised bed or earth boxes, depending on what their living situation was. They were provided with all of the soil and tools and plants, fertilizers, basically everything they needed. And then they were also provided mentorship through the Master Gardeners. So the Master Gardeners visited every 2 months, and then they were also in contact with their mentees over the phone or by email to help answer gardening questions and problem solve issues that came up in the interim there. So they did so this was an efficacy trial, so they only had 12 members, so they weren't really able to look at significant changes pre and post. And they did not have a control group, again, because this was an efficacy trial to see if the concept was worthwhile and would work. But they did use very rigorous outcome measures. So they used a bunch of physical functioning tests to look at how it affected people's physical abilities, things like the get up and go test, the 6-minute walk, the 30-second chair stand, so things that are used, clinically to evaluate people's mobility. And 90% of the participants improved their physical functioning over the course of the year. 40% of the participants increased fruit and vegetable intake by greater than 1 serving per day. I think that that's definitely lower than would be optimal. I think maybe one of the reasons why this might be the case is because they didn't provide the hands-on nutrition education that I think is also vital to get that produce from the garden into people's mouths and nourishing their bodies. So some of the feedback, the qualitative feedback that they got from the participants is that it would be very helpful to have recipes and education about how to use the food in the kitchen. And then 60% of the participants increased their physical activity by at least 30 minutes per week, which is absolutely fabulous. And they just use a physical activity questionnaire to look at that. I think the really exciting thing, the results that they had, was that they really had very excellent feedback from both the cancer survivors and the master gardeners. So they had a huge interest from their master gardening club to fill the slots. They found all of their mentors within just a couple of weeks and actually had quite a few people on the waiting list who wanted to participate, but they weren't able to get enough cancer survivors. The cancer survivors reported, really positive perceptions of the program's influence. They felt like it motivated them to improve their diet and eat more vegetables. And all of them intended to continue gardening, and most of them actually planned to expand their gardens the next year. The Master Gardener participants also reported high levels of satisfaction. They 100% of them said that they would want to participate in the program again, and the majority of them also said that they would be interested in participating in an expanded program, a multi-year program. So they really found it very rewarding to work one-on-one with this population, and had a very positive experience. So although we don't have a lot of research evaluating interventions like this and proving that they do work, we do know of several different promising intervention techniques, things that we know from other research efforts will lead to more effective programs. And so some of those are multi-component programs, so addressing the problem from multiple angles, longer intervention length, so not a one-of or a couple weeks, but really trying to have it be long enough so that people can really have the chance to work through the stages of change their habits, and then have those habits become embedded in their daily lives. We also don't just want to educate for the sake of education. We want our education to be directed at behavior change. And the final thing that we definitely want to work with is small groups. So the personal contact, the one-on-one, or the small group contact really does appear to be more effective in changing these dietary behavior change things that we want to change. So less than 10 participants is a rule of thumb that I've seen some people suggest. So I want to say a big thank you to the New Haven Farms leaderships, volunteers, sponsors, and members. I want to call out a few people who, without which the program wouldn't exist. So Rebecca Klein is the executive director. Mari is there in between Chef Bun and Chef Pablo. Monique is the research director, and Jacqueline is the farmer that made it possible. So thank you all very much for your attention, and I would be happy to take any questions or have a discussion about anything that I presented today.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
You talked about you hinted that maybe being involved in the community gardens maybe helps people change their behavior better than, say, just participating in a food sense or FNET class and then buying their fruits and vegetables at the store using their horizon card. Could you comment on that more?
Sure. So we definitely don't have any research to support that idea. I think that it might be true, and I think that that would be a very interesting question to ask. I think you're exactly right. There are things about participating in the gardening that you don't get from the SNAP Ed. So there's the emotional benefits, there's the feeling of accomplishment, there's the feeling of connection to where our food comes from. The actual having the garden there leads to the community development aspects that I was talking about earlier in the program. But that's definitely not to minimize, the SNAP Ed type of class. Like we saw in the studies when I was talking about vegetable provision, educating people on vegetables, how to use them, and why they're important was just as effective as vegetable provision. And it's really when we combine the two, so taking both of these places where Extension's very excellent and helping people overcome the barrier of not having the skills to know how to use vegetables or not having the education about why they're important to them, as well as providing them with this community, social, psychological experience that really, I think, may lead to increased motivation to eat the vegetables. So great question. I definitely would love to talk more about how we put together a program and what researchers we need to bring on board to be able to do that research. I think that would be I think that doing research like that's relevant not only to Extension, but is also very timely and important to researchers and community health workers around the country, is a great way to increase Extension's visibility and its relevance in the years going forward. So, other questions or comments? All right.
Carrie?
Well, thank you all. Oh, go ahead, Anne.
If we're interested, or what do we need to start looking for? This seems really big. I'm not sure exactly where to attack. Where do we start?
Right. So I think so I think that's a great question. I think in the video, for those of you that couldn't see, one of the things that one of the participants says, we started small and now there's a lot more. And that's something that I've heard both from them and from other specialists from other states, that they really do think it's important to start small and kind of learn lessons as they go. So I think one of the first things that I'd love to get off in the next couple years would be smaller programs, multi-week programs, because I think we're going to need pilot data showing that we're able to put together a program like this and deliver it and collect the data and the information effectively that we need. And so that's definitely the first step in my mind as I see going forward. So smaller pilot projects in single communities or maybe in a couple different counties to then provide us with the data and the results to be able to, and the efficacy analysis, that we're able to put on the program to then be able to try to apply for a larger grant. The other thing that I think is really important is trying to put together a coalition. So we need, obviously, not just ourselves in Extension. I feel like we also need community partners. We need researchers to help us, very rigorously test these and prove that it works, at least at the development stage. Of course, we need, multiple Extension people from different areas and backgrounds who are interested and want to come on board.
I have a question.
Yep.
In the New Haven study, how were participants in the community garden selected? Was it first come, first serve? Was it a geographic area?
Yeah, so we, so the geographic area that we recruited from was the Fairhaven community, but participants were not excluded if they were from outside, you know, if they were from the next neighborhood over. Um, it definitely was kind of a first come, first serve. And then the other thing that we were trying to do, we were trying to recruit lower income people who are at risk for diabetes just because of the underlying questions about diabetes prevention. And that was just related to when the garden was first conceptualized, it being part of a diabetes prevention program. Any other questions? Okay, well, I thank everyone very much for their time and attention. Please feel free to email me or call me if you want to discuss any of these things more. And look forward to talking to you more in the future.